This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And this half hour brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, lots and lots of snacks. There's a lot of playoff football this weekend. That's right, lots of playoff football this weekend. So you need to stock up. It's also going to get really cold, so go today and stock up. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. And now they have ready-to-drink cocktails like High Noon, Crown Royal, and Jack Daniels. And the pickle bar led by the Barrels and the Dills, indeed second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. I believe, Todd, we're getting out of the gate with John Sauber today.
That is correct. He's ready to roll.
John, welcome. Happy New Year to you. It was great to see you down in both Phoenix and Miami.
Great seeing you down there, too, Steve. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, let's start with this. Tuesday is come and gone. The 48-hour window's come and gone. And Wednesday for the NFL draft is come and gone. So Penn State's roster has stabilized, at least until the next portal window. What's your thought on how Penn State came out of all this between the draft and the portal?
I think they came out of this about as well as they could have. You know, there were some guys who I think played well enough in the playoff that it could have changed their mind, could have changed their decision and sent them to the NFL, sent them to the portal, and, you know, they hung on to those guys. Denai Dennis Sutton's the first one that comes to mind, right? He had, 4.5 sacks in the playoff run, the strip sack, the interception. He looks phenomenal, and he decides to run it back. And I think those are the kind of guys that you need to set the tone for the program that, hey, you know, there are, you know, the pastures aren't always greener, right? Like you can always move on, but you're only going to have one shot at kind of this run and to run it back and to redeem yourselves on some level. And I think Penn State took advantage of that and that messaging. And there's a world where, you know, a year from now we're talking about them in the same way we're talking about this Ohio State team that ran it back and suddenly they're loaded and playing for a national title game.
The key for both Notre Dame and Ohio State, and I talked about this a lot in interviews when I was interviewed about it and also in our pregame show, they had the ability financially to have roster retention. How important was it Penn State financially had the money for roster retention?
Oh, I think it's everything, Steve. I think that's how you kind of keep yourself where you're at. It's how you keep your footing in college football now. I think that we'll see as this continues to evolve that the best programs, as I think James Franklin has done since he got to Penn State, focuses on keeping the best guys you have and then supplementing them with portal guys, supplementing them obviously with traditional high school recruiting, JUCO recruiting and everything too. But I think the best teams in the country are going to be able to keep their guys because they have the financial means to do it, right? I think having that financial backing, whether it's rev share or NIL or what have you, I think is going to be of the utmost importance, and it is for Penn State. And you know, I don't expect that to be any different moving forward either. I think this is going to be a key cog for Penn State is year in and year out convincing those juniors, those redshirt sophomores that hey, you can make a lot of money here too and keep playing college football and still have the NFL waiting for you down the line.
There's also another interesting element of this. The Biden administration's Department of Education yesterday came out and discussed about financial rules about 50-50 when it comes to the internal distribution of the House settlement, which is $20.5 million. You and I both know there are ways around this, but how interested are you to see as to how Linda McMahon and the Department of Education handles it with Trump versus what has been handled by the Biden administration in the waning moments of his presidency.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to monitor, right? I think it's difficult to execute something like that with the 50-50 split, like you said, and you intimated with me too. Like, there are ways around that, right? Like, and college programs will work their way around that to hit whatever benchmarks they have to hit. But I don't know that it's something that's necessarily going to sustain. I don't know if it's something that I would expect to be the case moving forward, just because we see stuff like that change all the time and can kind of change at the drop of a hat. But I also, don't know that there's anything else to operate on right now, right? Like, I think this is until something changes, that Penn State will adapt however they need to adapt to any type of revenue share split that they have to, and so will every other university.
Yeah, and because, first of all, Judge Claudia Wilkin will not sign off on all of this till April 7th anyway. So right. You have that period of time between now and then to see how it plays out. It just was a curveball thrown in there. But, yeah, but there are ways to work around it. All right, so moving forward now, with Penn State and what they've done in capturing players in the transfer portal, are there any positions you're looking at right now where maybe if they picked up another guy in the portal to help them, what positions would they be?
I still think it's got to be wide receiver, and I think that's going to be the position that we're all talking about until it's not an issue anymore, basically. And I think rightfully so, right? I think Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross can come in and contribute and be good players, but I think fans want to see that number one guy. They want to see that former five-star walk through the door, right, that is highly touted and has produced somewhere else. Those guys, aren't growing on trees or anything like that, so it's not exactly easy to pick up someone at that level, but I do think that's the one spot that Penn State will continue to look at, whether it's, post-national title game if there are guys that go in the portal or the spring window or what have you. I think until there's a true number one receiver on the roster that everyone can kind of look at and say, okay, this is kind of where Tyler Warren's production is going to go, then I think that's going to continue to be a question. I don't know that that's frankly not the case with Hudson and Ross. I think both can pick up the slack, and I'm a big fan of Devontae Ross. Everyone makes the Tez Johnson comparison because they both came from Troy and transferred up to the Big Ten, but I do think there are real similarities there, and the kind of game-breaking speed that he has, something that you can't really teach. And so, losing Trey Wallace and Amari Evans does change the calculus a bit too, right? Like, now there's more production that has to be replaced, and so I think there's just a level of uncertainty at wideout that until there is that one finite guy that everyone can point to, that will be the spot that Penn State needs to kind of continue to monitor in the portal.
Are there a couple of young players, John, that you're really interested to see how they grow based on what you see in the spring?
Yeah, the one guy I keep going back to, and he's not even necessarily young anymore, is Caden Saunders, right? Like, I'm still very high on his ability as a wide receiver. He was a five-star recruit for a reason. He's unbelievable at separating in the middle of the field, something that Penn State really lacked last year. He's a bit of a true slot receiver, so that kind of limits him, but he was not someone we saw healthy at all last year, right? We would go into those Wednesday practices, and he would be limping. He wouldn't be, running at full speed. He wouldn't have lingering issues that would limit him. And he's heading into year 4, so I guess it's more make or break time for him than anything, right? It's not really he's not the young guy anymore, but he's someone that between him and Tyzier Denmark, I think they probably have a starting slot receiver between one of those two. Denmark being a sophomore now, but yeah, I think Saunders is someone that I've been kind of waiting for the breakout, and I based on the talent level, based on what we've seen, I feel like it's got to be coming at some point, and this spring is kind of the chance for him to really put it all together.
Yeah. Drew Allar, when they play Nevada and he's unscathed, it'll be the 30th start of his career. What do you think he's now capable of doing at quarterback because of experience?
Yeah, I think he's capable of being one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I think he's been capable of that at times and was this year, but I think, the experience is so important at that position specifically, and getting on the same page as your receivers and developing a rapport with your offensive coordinator and having the confidence to make the throws that you can make. And I think that for him specifically, that has been something that's always been worth monitoring, right? Under Mike Yurcich, he didn't always feel like the most confident quarterback in the world. Under Andy Kotelnicki, you could see the confidence go up, and in some ways, trying to make throws that maybe he shouldn't, but also he's one of 3 quarterbacks on the planet who can make that throw. so why not try it? And we saw that several times on completions to guys like Tyler Warren and Amari Evans this year, where he would make a throw from one hash mark to the opposite sideline, and you just had no idea how the ball got there. And so I think him having the confidence to make those decisions, to not be risk averse, quite frankly, to be willing to press down the field, to make decisions that maybe don't seem sane in the moment, but then he makes the throw and then it makes all the sense in the world. I think having that confidence is the biggest thing that he's going to continue to gain as he's a starter longer and longer. And I think this year there's going to be a real chance for him to take a pretty massive step forward in that regard.
What was it like for you to cover this run, especially beginning with the Washington game, where they had to win the 4 in a row? What was it like for you to cover all this?
Pretty exhausting. It was a lot of fun. There's no denying that too. But yeah, this was. I think we hear James Franklin mention all the time about the length of the season and how it kind of drags out, and I think that's true for everyone. But I think also that what comes with that is the excitement starts to build, right? Like you more people are reading you, more people are listening to your podcasts, your radio appearances, what have you, right? There's more excitement around the program. The conversation starts to change, and I think that's a lot of fun too, as you see kind of the development of the players that we've gotten to know in the locker room, that they're getting better and better, and you're seeing the improvement happen in front of you. And I think that's one of the more exciting things in college football, is watching that development take place. And obviously, the locker room can be a tough place to be after a loss, but I think there's also a lot of storytelling there too that makes it exciting. I think this run was so authentic in a way that you really don't get in sports in general. I always talk about the 2017 Philadelphia Eagles being like that, right, where you have that authentic, out-of-nowhere run that makes it feel so much more different than when you have the weight of expectations. And I think, the weight of expectations might be coming for this Penn State team, because that's usually what happens when you play really well. But I think for now, this year was it's going to be a moment that a lot of people are able to point to and say, like, do you remember that year, right? Like, do you remember when this happened and no one sort of saw it coming, and Penn State makes that run to the semifinal?
The defensive coordinator part, Tom Allen has gone to Clemson. Any initial thoughts on what you know about that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? I think, we've heard Tom say publicly about wanting to be closer to his family and the importance of family, and I think all that rings true with what I've heard about that decision-making process and why he made the decision he did and why he's at Clemson now. And I think for Penn State, this comes down to finding the right candidate at the right time, right? I think it would be really easy to kind of just try and pick a candidate right now, get someone in place, and then roll forward into spring ball. I think this is the kind of situation where James Franklin should take his time, make that right decision, get the guy that is going to elevate this defense, because I do think there is room for growth in that regard. I don't think this defense has necessarily even hit its ceiling yet. I think there is so much upside in the secondary and on the defensive line that you need to find a defensive coordinator that is going to do everything he can to kind of maximize the talent there, right? The Denai Dennis Suttons, the Zane Durants, the A.J. Harrises of the world. Those are talents that you don't see every day in college football. And so I think getting it right has got to be of the utmost importance right now, rather than getting it done quickly. I know fans don't always want to hear that because they want the name in place, they want the press conference, they want to hear what the coach has to say. But I think patience would be really crucial right now, and kind of waiting for whatever shoe may drop, because there is time, right? Spring ball doesn't start for a bit yet. We've all got a little bit of time on our hands now to work through things, and I think James Franklin would do well to take advantage of that.
Well, winter workouts haven't even started for these guys in terms of getting them out there, so it's not okay, right? At some point, hey, you can take it one step at a time. Fans hate when I say that. Right?
Yeah,
I'm too patient for people. I know that. I've always known that. Like, why are you so patient? I'm like, because they're not playing this week. I'm not that worried. Okay, so basketball. Look, they keep losing. When they lost, it's been close, except for Illinois. They haven't had the full lineup out there. They've got Rutgers coming up Monday night, which is 1-2 in a row, including a nice win at Nebraska last night. Your thoughts on where this team is right now?
Yeah, so we actually just got out of the BJC talking to Mike Rhodes, and the loss of Puff Johnson for however long it is. He said that it will be some time that they're without Puff, which is not totally unexpected based on the injury at Michigan State, but I think that's going to be damaging and the kind of thing that could alter the season, right? It's the kind of injury that they have to be able to replace from within and pretty quickly because Puff was becoming such an integral part of how they play defense, frankly, of how they attack smaller lineups with him as a small ball 5. I think it had been really important to what they do. And you mentioned Rutgers coming in. Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper are no joke. Those are two of the most talented guys in the Big Ten, and they're going to present an immediate difficult challenge for Penn State. And so it's kind of imperative that they get back on track and get back on track quickly here, because otherwise, 4 can turn into 5, can turn into 6, can turn into 7 real quick in the Big Ten. And I still think this is an NCAA tournament team, but right now they're definitely up against the ropes a little bit.
John, always a pleasure, an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Appreciate your time very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. Really appreciate you having me on.
John Sauber, Center Daily Times, always doing great work. Appreciate him. We will come back more in a moment. Brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
There's something to be said about a sale with a handshake, a service technician who really knows what he's doing. They can explain it in English what the problem is. There's nothing better than having that friend you can trust in the area. That's Sunbury Motors, where you get selection, knowledgeable salespeople, and prices that fit your budget, and more important, that friend you can trust. Welcome to Sunbury Motors, Kia, Ford, and Hyundai. You can shop other dealers and compare prices, but at Sunbury Motors, you get their lowest price promise. They research the current used vehicle market and guarantee their used car prices are the lowest. If you find a lower price, Sunbury Motors will beat it. 3 dealers all in one. See their full new and pre-owned inventory at sunburymotors.com. Pick out a vehicle you like and schedule your test drive online. Follow them on Facebook. Sunbury Motors Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.